Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first podcasts on the Internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the Earth as we come to air with edition number 1406 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The ARRL joins America 250 as a supporting partner for the nation's 250th anniversary celebration. We will have all the details. The National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinators Question Pool Committee has removed 2 questions from the general and extra class pools. The league announces additional funding is available for qualified amateur radio clubs. Open Ham Clock Backend aims to keep ham clock ticking. We will tell you about it. Amateurs in Brazil mark an anniversary with a slow-scan television special event station. Belarus amateurs are threatened with the death penalty. The Earth is hit by the largest solar radiation storm in 23 years. The FCC fast-tracks SpaceX's plans to orbit 1 million satellites. You heard that right. And the Commission is looking for your input. The ARRL student coding competition is now underway and holds a $25,000 prize, and amateur radio clubs all across the United States will run special event stations for both President's Day and Washington's birthday. We will tell you how you can work them in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will present Part 8 of his series entitled Building a Shack. This episode is subtitled, Will It Ever End? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of Dead Electrical Dudes. This edition's stiff is Georg Simon Ohm, a German physicist and mathematician. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DX expeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio here in really chilly and snowy Albany, New York, where we've got 2 feet of snow outside our studio. The real air temperature right now is minus 17 as I'm recording this, and with a 30-mile-an-hour wind outside, who knows what the wind chill might be. I'm George with 3 layers of clothes on in our studio here in Albany, New York.
And reporting this week from our news bureau at Ham Station K2MST inside the Museum of Science and Technology in downtown Syracuse, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, your humble reporter, KB2FAF.
Reporting from Bradenton, Florida, where I've survived freezing temperatures and frozen iguanas, I'm Mike Nikolich, K9DXM.
And reporting from our remote news bureau in frigid Naugatuck, Connecticut, I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
And reporting from our Troy, New York news bureau, where we're considering hibernation for the rest of the winter, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where we're facing more sub-zero nights with 40-knot winds on a possible thaw next week, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we have seen temps down near 0 and approaching 70 in the past week or so, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, trying to avoid catching pneumonia.
This Week in Amateur Radio is coming to you guaranteed 100% human.
ARRL announced this week that it's supporting Partner of America 250, joining the nationwide celebration of the 250th anniversary of our country in 2026. With more details on America 250, we go to John Ross, KD8 IDJ, who files this special report.
America 250 is the national nonpartisan organization charged by Congress to lead the commemoration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, a milestone that marks America's semi-quincentennial. Through education, engagement, and service, America 250 seeks to bring Americans together to reflect on the nation's history and renew commitment to the ideals that unite us. As a supporting partner, ARRL will contribute to America's 250 mission by highlighting the historic and ongoing role of amateur radio in connecting people, supporting public service, and strengthening civic engagement across the United States. Since its founding in 1914, ARRL and its members have played a vital role in technical innovation, emergency communications, and volunteer service in communities. Amateur radio has been a part of the American story since the earliest days of wireless communication, said ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR. For more than a century, the amateur radio service has advanced the nation's communications capabilities by fostering technical innovation, developing a pool of trained and skilled operators, strengthening emergency and public service communications, and promoting international goodwill. These enduring contributions reflect why amateur radio continues to serve the public interest as a uniquely resilient and volunteer-driven national resource. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
As we approach America's 250th anniversary, it's important to recognize the organizations and volunteers who have connected and served communities for generations, said Jen Corden, Executive Vice President of America 250. Amateur radio reflects the spirit of service, innovation, and civic engagement at the heart of our nation's story. And we're proud to welcome ARRL as a supporting partner in this historic commemoration. And now with more on this story, we go to our very own Mike Nikolich, K9DXM.
ARRL is also strengthening STEM education by bringing amateur radio into American classrooms through hands-on project-based curricula and teacher training. By connecting youth with real-world experiences, these programs bridge educational gaps, boost student achievement, and open pathways to higher education and careers in wireless communications and related technical fields. As part of its alignment with the U.S. semi-quincentennial, ARRL is advancing several major initiatives throughout the year. As previously announced to members, the ARRL Board of Directors has designated 2026 as the year of the club, recognizing the essential role that local amateur radio clubs play in building community, mentoring new operators, and delivering public service at the grassroots level. This nationwide focus celebrates clubs as engines of civic engagement and local connection. ICOM America is the official sponsor of the ARRL Year of the Club. ARRL has already launched the America 250 Worked All States year-long event, calling on amateur radio operators worldwide to make contact with all 50 U.S. states in honor of America's 250th anniversary. ARRL will produce an achievement award for radio amateurs who meet this challenge. 2026 ARRL Field Day is June 27th and 28th. ARRL announces that the theme of 2026 ARRL Field Day is Amateur Radio, a National Resource. Field Day is an annual amateur radio activity organized since 1933 and the largest on-the-air operating event in North America. Field Day showcases amateur radio's readiness to provide resilient communications in times of need while engaging the public through hands-on demonstrations and community outreach. ARRL's partnership with America 250 reflects a shared commitment to honoring America's past while investing in the civic, technical, and volunteer spirit that will carry the nation forward.
The National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinators Question Pool Committee has removed 2 questions from the General Class Question Pool and 1 more question from the Extra Class Pool from use. For all the details, we go to League Headquarters where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this report.
Due to recently published FCC rule changes affecting the 60-meter band, general class questions G1A04 and G1C09 are no longer valid and must be removed from use on examinations. Extra class question E4D05 must also be removed from it. It contains more than 1 correct answer. And all affected questions should be removed from the examinations as soon as possible. Updated general class question pool files, including the errata and new information, have been posted to the NCVEC General Class Question Pool webpage. and the current Element 3 general question pool became effective on July 1st, 2023, and it is now valid through June 30th, 2027. Updated question pool files have also been posted to the NCVEC Extra Class Question Pool's webpage, and the current Element 4 Extra Question Pool became effective on July 1st, 2024, and it is valid through June 30th, 2028. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Updated question pool files have also been posted to the National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinators Extra Class Question Pool webpage. The current Element 4 Extra Question Pool became effective on July 1st, 2024, and is valid through June 30th, 2028. The ARRL-VEC advises the amateur radio community, and particularly volunteer examiners, to regularly check the NCVEC website at ncvec.org for updates to the question pools, which may include errata and withdrawn questions.
At their annual meeting on January 29th, the ARRL Foundation Board of Directors voted unanimously to increase the maximum grant award in their grants program from $3,000 to $5,000 in support of the ARRL Year of the Club. Radio clubs are encouraged to apply for funding to support eligible amateur radio-related projects, particularly those with a focus on educating, licensing, supporting activities that contribute to developing active hams. The Foundation Grants Program accepts proposals 3 times a year through an online application in February, June, and October. Information can be found on the ARRL website. Questions regarding grant proposals or eligibility, which may be directed by email to foundation@arrl.org.
A group of ham radio operators have stepped up to keep ham clock operating beyond its scheduled sunset in June. An open-source replacement for the back-end processes required to keep the popular ham clock project alive is well underway. Developed by Brian, Kilo Oscar 4 Alpha Quebec Foxtrot, and Austin, Kilo Nancy 4 Lima November Bravo, Open Ham Clock Backend is designed to be a drop-in replacement for the backend server that populates Ham Clock with its signature set of 40-plus data points and visualizations. Ham Clock relies on an internet backend to provide live space weather, propagation, DX, and news data. With the passing of its original developer, that backend is no longer being maintained, which means many ham clocks will gradually lose live functionality even though the devices themselves still work. An open-source replacement backend is now being developed that recreates the same data feeds ham clock expects using publicly available sources such as NOAA, Space Weather Services, PSK Reporter, and DX information sites. From the ham clock's point of view, nothing changes. It connects to the same paths and receives the same data formats without any firmware modification. We are very close to replicating nearly every possible data source and making slight improvements along the way. The system is free, open source, and designed to run locally on a small Linux system, allowing individual hams or clubs to keep existing ham clocks fully operational. The goal is preservation, not reinvention, keeping ham clock working exactly as intended for years to come. Currently, Open Ham Clock Backend is designed to be self-hosted, requiring any user wishing to extend ham clock's usefulness beyond June to run the software themselves. However, options are being considered for a centralized version to be stood up for all ham clock users to take advantage of.
Hams in Brazil are marking the anniversary of the national organization that represents them with a slow scan TV event and a separate month-long activation of special anniversary call signs. When the Liga de Amadores Brasileiros de Radio Emissão, or LABRE, the League of Brazilian Amateur Radio Transmitters, was created in 1934 to represent its national radio amateurs, it would be almost 3 decades before anyone would have the use of amateur radio satellites. Now, however, hams in Brazil have a choice of many such satellites, and to celebrate the 92nd anniversary of the League's founding, they have chosen the Russian CubeSat UMKA-1, or RS-40S, to transmit SSTV imagery between February 6th through the 9th. The transmissions are on 437.625 MHz, and the SSTV mode is Robot 36, sent every 3 minutes. Any operator who receives the imagery will be eligible for a special certificate. Hams with a more terrestrial interest are being invited to chase 28 special anniversary call signs that are on the air from February 1st through the 1st of March. The call signs represent each region of Brazil and, according to a Facebook post, present a unique opportunity for fellowship, cultural and technical exchange, and friendship, values that have always been at the heart of Labre.
NASA has selected 34 volunteer organizations and individuals from around the world to help track the Orion spacecraft during the upcoming crewed Artemis II mission, which will carry 4 astronauts on a journey around the Moon. The selected participants include commercial service providers, universities, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and individual amateur radio operators, reflecting a broad international collaboration supporting humanity's return to deep space. While NASA's Near Space Network and Deep Space Network will provide primary communications and navigation support, the volunteers will passively track radio signals transmitted by Orion during its approximately 10-day mission. Participants were chosen from proposals submitted in August 2025. They will submit tracking data to NASA for analysis, helping the agency evaluate broader aerospace and amateur radio tracking capabilities. No funding is exchanged as part of this collaborative effort. This is a real step toward SCAN's commercial first vision, said Kevin Coggins, NASA's Deputy Associate Administrator for Space Communications and Navigation, or SCAN. By inviting external organizations to demonstrate their capabilities during a human spaceflight mission, we're strengthening the marketplace we'll rely on as we explore farther into the solar system. This isn't about tracking one mission, but about building a resilient public and private ecosystem that will support the golden age of innovation and exploration. The initiative builds on a similar effort during Artemis I in 2022, when 10 volunteers successfully tracked Orion and provided valuable lessons on data formatting, quality, and standards compliance. For Artemis II, SCAN now requires all submitted tracking data to meet its system standards. Public interest has increased significantly, with about 47 ground assets across 14 countries expected to support the mission. Amateur radio organizations and enthusiasts are well represented in the selected group. Participants include AMSAT Argentina, AMSAT Deutschland, the Amateur Radio Exploration Ground Station Consortium known as CAMRAS in the Netherlands, the Deep Space Exploration Society in Colorado, and several individual operators, including Scott Tilley of Canada. Their involvement highlights the growing technical capability of the global amateur radio community to contribute meaningfully to deep space missions. Although NASA has formally selected a limited group to submit official tracking data, anyone with appropriate equipment can attempt to track Artemis II independently, either by monitoring Orion's radio emissions or by observing the spacecraft optically with a telescope during its translunar coast. NASA has emphasized that it is simply accepting data from a designated group and not restricting independent observation. For amateur astronomers and radio operators alike, Artemis II offers a rare opportunity to witness and participate in humanity's return to deep space exploration.
The Irish Radio Transmitter Society is reporting that Belarusian state authorities have detained over 50 licensed members of the Belarusian Federation of Radio Amateurs and Radio Sportsmen. They are accused of treason and espionage and have been paraded on state television. The accusations are that they have used Biofung handhelds and consumer-grade SDR dongles to intercept military radio traffic. QSL cards received through the QSL Bureau and log contacts with operators in Europe or the United States are being presented as clandestine reporting to NATO agents, say the Irish report.
Region 1 of the International Amateur Radio Union has issued a clarification following reports of the prosecution of amateur radio operators in Belarus. In the statement, Region 1 stresses that amateur radio is a technical, educational, and service-oriented hobby defined internationally, and emphasizes that while the individuals involved hold amateur licenses, the actions leading to their prosecution fall entirely outside the scope of the amateur radio service. The clarification notes that an amateur radio license does not grant immunity from national laws and does not authorize use of equipment for activities that contravene the legal framework of a sovereign state, adding, We believe the public narrative surrounding this case has been somewhat misplaced. Region 1 further states that it does not condone or support any actions by licensed operators that bypass legal requirements or violate the terms of their amateur license, and that the situation is a matter for the relevant judicial systems.
A major act of vandalism has disrupted production and shipping at the Dishtronics, Tentec, and Alpha RF Systems factory in Dayton, Ohio. According to company owner Mike Dishup, N8WFF, a group of thieves destroyed the factory's underground electrical infrastructure in order to steal the copper cable. The thieves extracted approximately 2,000 feet of half-inch copper cable weighing approximately 2,800 pounds, explained Dishup, with an estimated salvage value of $12,000 and a replacement cost of more than $35,000. Dishup told the ARRL that power was restored on January 14th, a month after the break-in, but explained that this interruption has impacted the timing for everything the company had on schedule by at least 3 months due to loss of time and capital. He says the police investigation is ongoing.
The Federal Communications Commission seems eager to let SpaceX experiment with massive data centers in space. On Wednesday, Chairman Brendan Carr tweeted, "The FCC welcomes and now seeks comment on the SpaceX application for orbital data centers." SpaceX's application to launch up to 1 million satellites has been accepted by the agency, kicking off a public comment period. The announcement is surprising because the company only submitted its proposal on Friday. Usually the FCC takes weeks or months to respond. In this case, it made a decision in days, even though SpaceX's proposal appears preliminary and even rushed, according to space experts, some of whom question the constellation's feasibility. For perspective, only 14,500 satellites are currently in orbit. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk now wants to dramatically increase that number by about 70 times, raising questions about the environmental toll from the required rocket launches and the potential for space debris. The FCC may have acted fast because SpaceX's application urged it to expeditiously authorize the 1 million satellite plan. In short, the sooner the SpaceX orbital data center system is licensed for its limited use of the required spectrum, the sooner this spectrum can support a revolutionary space platform that'll benefit humanity, SpaceX said. In addition, the Commission has made it a priority to fast-track its satellite approval process to help the U.S. counter China's satellite ambitions. It's Space Race 2.0. The CCP, Chinese Communist Party, is aggressively pursuing space dominance. They want to beat us to orbit, FCC Space Bureau Chief Jay Schwartz said back in November. A month earlier, Carr himself said the FCC was moving to a default no process with a default to yes framework for at least some of the satellite plans.
On December 28th last year, rapid hyperinflation of the Iranian rial, their monetary currency, saw shopkeepers implement a general strike, which soon spiraled into nationwide protests. With demonstrations gaining momentum at the start of 2026, the state implemented a nationwide internet blackout on January 8th. The blackout itself has seen Iran's internet traffic plummet. According to internet traffic observation company NetBlocks, Iran has seen a 98% drop in connectivity to the outside world. The shutdown was largely facilitated by Iran's telecommunication infrastructure company, which controls Iran's international gateways. The company has issued withdrawal messages to global routers, effectively making Iranian IP addresses unreachable from outside the country. It's reported, however, Starlink is being effectively blocked by the government, potentially by military-grade jammers being used to cripple the satellite constellation's effectiveness. Around 30% of Starlink's Iranian traffic was disrupted in the early hours of the protests, later rising to over 80%.
Federal Communications Chairman Brendan Carr announced that the Commission will vote on an order that maximizes the potential of the 900 megahertz band by enabling broadband deployment across all 10 megahertz of the band. This vote is the culmination of the joint petition filed by Anterix, Ameren, Enterprise Wireless Alliance, Energy, Lower Colorado River Authority, Portland General Electric, San Diego Gas and Electric, among others, seeking authority to expand the 900 MHz broadband segment from 6 MHz to 10 MHz. According to the chairman, the FCC is advancing efforts to expand broadband use and create new opportunities for utilities and critical infrastructure providers. He shared that his action builds on our previous work to realign the band through a market-driven transition and reflects our commitment to ensuring that spectrum is used efficiently and in ways that strengthen the American economy. The report and order will be voted on during the FCC's Open Commission meeting scheduled for Wednesday, February 18th of 2026. Anterix's Chief Regulatory and Corporate Communications Officer Christopher Gutman McCabe said, Anterix is extremely excited to see the chairman's announcement and incredibly grateful to the chairman and his team, as well as the staff at the FCC. As the chairman stated, the Commission's proposal to authorize a market-based transition to 10 MHz broadband in the 900 MHz band builds directly on the proven success of the FCC's 2020 action establishing the 6 MHz broadband allocation. The utilities deploying 900 MHz private wireless broadband networks have launched a transformation of the nation's grid communications capabilities, enhancing grid security, reliability, and resilience for millions of Americans, and advancing our nation's security and prosperity. The Open Commission meeting, scheduled for February 18th, will be webcast live with a replay available to the public.
The ARRL is asking members to help encourage licensed youth in their communities to participate in the ARRL Student Coding Competition, an initiative focused on developing practical resources for the amateur radio service. Reporting from League headquarters, here's John Ross, KD8IDJ, with more on the competition.
The competition, which began January 1st, 2026, challenges young amateurs to create a mobile application that ARRL will use as a long-term learning resource. Rules and app specifications were released on January 1st and are available at coding.arrl.org. The competition centers on building a useful, accessible FCC exam preparation app for iOS devices. The app must support technician, general, and extra class license exam and use the official NCVEC question pools. Judging will focus on usability, clarity, stability, and code quality, qualities that ensure the finished product can serve as a dependable study resource for current and future radio amateurs. Eligibility is limited to ARRL members to age 21 or younger who hold a U.S. amateur radio license, competing individually or in teams of up to 3. ARRL membership is free for full-time students, making participation accessible to students already active in amateur radio and those newly licensed. Parents, educators, and ARRL members involved in radio clubs, VE teams, and youth outreach are encouraged to share this opportunity with students who have an interest in software development or STEM learning. I'm John Ross, KD&IDJ.
Project submissions will be accepted between February 1st and March 31st, 2026, with source code and documentation submitted online. Winning entries will receive national recognition with total awards of up to $25,000 authorized by the ARRL Board of Directors. While pre-registration is optional, it is recommended to receive competition updates and reminders. Complete information is available at coding.arrl.org.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. Let's start off with an update on N4 Tango, the activation of the Dry Tortugas National Park located 70 miles west of Key West, Florida. Although not classified as DX, these guys are basically performing a DXpedition, and I'm excited for them. Here's what they had to say. Quote, "We will be doing a POTA activation, which is Parks on the Air, of US-0023, the Dry Tortugas National Park, and other areas between February 17th and the 25th. This is not a typical POTA activation. In addition to POTA, this activation will include worldwide flora and fauna, World Lighthouses on the Air, Amateur Radio Lighthouse Society, Islands on the Air, and U.S. Islands. This will be a unique opportunity for our entire ham community to get involved in chasing," end quote. So if you have any interest at all in collecting awards, collecting points, or following any of those things I outlined, especially IOTA and POTA, you need to work these guys. You can get more information on the Nancy 4 Tango activation by going to QRZ.com and searching on N4T, or to their website at www.drytortugas.info. And as always, if you need more details or you're not clear about something, you can drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just do what several other listeners have done and drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com and I'll fix you up. So let's start off with Sable Island, which is Charlie Yankee Zero Sierra. 6 weeks from today, the CY0S team members will begin their travels to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Weather remains the focal point of the team right now. They know that the weather on Sable will be a challenge. This was certainly the case for the March 2023 CY0SD expedition. The team members are currently watching the, quote, bomb cyclone off the east coast of the U.S. This storm is forecast to have a major impact on the Canadian Maritimes and Sable Island. The team has been preparing for 40 to 50 knot winds and frequent snow showers, which are common occurrences on Sable Island in March. Since there are no trees on the island, there isn't anything to block the fierce winds coming off the North Atlantic. Over the next week, time will be spent attaching the many guy ropes to the 5 spider poles. It's much easier to do this task now in a controlled environment than in possible gale force winds. After the storm this weekend, the team will be anxious to learn the condition of the beach landing area. And that came from Murray, the team leader, WA4DAN. And that is a brutal place. It's also nicknamed the graveyard of the Atlantic. So I don't know how much longer Canada will allow the expedition. So that may be one you want to move to the top of the list. Make sure you get them in the log. So we have 2 operations from the African country of Guinea-Bissau, which is Juliet 5. First, Ben, DA1 Delta X-Ray, the organizer of the J51A de-expedition to Guinea-Bissau in February and March 2026, shared several updates. The ARL has approved the J51A license for DXCC and the LOTW certificate has been received. After clarifying frequency and mode permissions with the national authority and confirming alignment with IARU Region 1 band plans, all standard bands and modes, including 160, 6 meters with the WARC bands and 50 megahertz, are confirmed valid for DXCC, IOTA, and other awards. The DXpedition is entirely privately funded with RF Power lending 5 amplifiers and all other equipment privately owned. Ben invites donations via Clublog OQRS and provides a link for more information. So good luck to them in Guinea-Bissau. We have a second one. J52 Echo Charlie is on until February 28th by operator Italy Zulu 3 Boston Uniform Radio, Livio. He has an IC7410, 100 watts to 3-element Yagi on 20, 15, and 10. So from Guinea-Bissau, most of us should be able to work him. Good luck with that. Well, some more activity in Africa, the Central African Republic and Chad, which are Tango Lima and Tango Tango. Derek, Tango Juliet 1 Gulf Delta, has established permanent amateur radio stations in the Central African Republic and in Chad, which are maintained locally. These stations, which are Tango Lima 8 Gulf Delta in Central African Republic and Tango Tango 1 Gulf Delta in Chad, are licensed to Derek, operate periodically, often remotely, using FT8, CW, and sideband. QSL confirmations are available via LOTW and Clublog. Here's an update on the ongoing operation from Deshisheo Island, and their call sign is Kilo Papa 5 stroke Nancy Papa 3 Victor India. They're now 2 weeks into their planned 30-day operation, so just about half. Their latest published statistics are as follows. Over 55,000 QSOs are in the log, with 91.1% of the QSOs with North America and Europe. And that would make sense because they're right on our doorstep. But hopefully the North American request desire will drop and they'll be able to get into some European countries and then, of course, Asia. From Morocco, which is Charlie Nancy, we have this. Yannick, F6 FYD, expects to return to Morocco next week. In early March, he also plans to go to Mogador Island, which is AF-065, Agadir and El Jajada, and has the call sign Charlie Nancy 2 Yankee Delta. So good luck to Yannick. From Guadeloupe in the Caribbean, which is Fox Gulf, Tango Fox 1 Oscar Lima Oliver will be live from Guadeloupe starting Wednesday of next week for approximately 7 days. So we're talking about the 4th to the 11th, or the 11th to the 18th. No word on what call sign he will be using. Following the stay in Guadeloupe, he plans to visit other islands pending permission to operate. So watch the clusters and keep an eye out for him. And if you know me, you know I'm waiting for this one. Bangladesh. A multinational team will operate as Sierra 21 Whiskey Delta from Bangladesh for 12 days in March of 2026. Their planned activity covers QO100 satellites as well as the HF bands from 160 to 10 meters. QSL cards will be handled by Delta Juliet 4 Mike X-ray and Club Log OQRS, and I am really excited for Bangladesh. I'd like to pass along another update on another Central African Republic activation. This is for Tango Lima 8 Boston Norway Whiskey. CR7 Boston Norway Whiskey, Yahoo reports on his TL8 BNW plans. Quote, assuming there are no logistical delays, I will be receiving some equipment this weekend to enhance my band capabilities. I plan to test the 160-meter band in both digital modes and sideband. To achieve this, I will need to adjust my dipole, which will be exclusively set up for the 160-meter band in February. After this period, I will reconfigure the dipole for 40 through 10 meters, end quote. He currently has an ICOM 705, a Juma PA100D amplifier, and a homemade tuner built by Charlie Tango 1 Charlie Oscar Uniform, Pedro. The entire station is designed so that everything, antennas, cables, and operational setup, fits inside a suitcase. He's considering options for a kilowatt amplifier. I don't think I have a chance, but I'd love to get him on 160. We have an update on the Alpha Uniform 2 Radio Sierra Lakshadweep Island. For the upcoming Alpha Uniform 2 Radio Sierra expedition, the operating permit has arrived, and it's good through February 15th. Victor Uniform 2 Radio Sierra, Sarath, says they plan to have it extended and make additional payments for the stay and be on as many days as possible. Permission from the WPC has also been extended until February 25th. The return tickets are open-ended. This time extension will be based on the support they receive from our community. And Lakshadweep was something that I chased for years, and I just got 2 years ago. So I'm going to be all over that one as well, trying to fill band slots. Nancy Echo 8 Zulu, Rick Dorsch, will be traveling through the southern South America for the month of February. His schedule includes the Falkland Islands, operating as Victor Papa 8 Tango Delta X-ray, February 7th to the 14th, operating CW, sideband, FT4, and FT8 on an ICOM IC7300 with a 40 through 6 meter Wyndham antenna. During the rest of the trip, he will be active as CE2-NE8Z, CE3, CE8, and LU-NE8Z from Chile and Argentina using the ICOM 7300 and an Outbacker vertical antenna for 20 through 6 meters, CW only. He'll then be in Ecuador as Hotel Charlie 1 Mike Delta Stroke 2. Rick will use his 6-meter remote station, which is 50.313 megahertz FT8, with a Yaesu FT857D and a 5-element LFA Rotoboy antenna. All QSOs can be sent through NE8Z. And he is a great guy and a great operator, and I wish him all the luck in the world. Another African country, we have Mali, Tango Zulu. The next Tango Zulu 1 Charlie Echo by Delta Kilo 1 Charlie Echo Omar is February 10th to March 1st, so just a couple days. He will be doing mostly FT8 and sideband and says when he's on FT8, he gives stations outside Europe precedent at all times. He plans special attention to 160-meter FT8, 80-meter FT8, and 6 meters, and will update daily on Club Log. The LOTW log will be updated after the operation. And in Mali, 60-meter operation is not allowed, so don't even watch for that. Some more plans for Guadeloupe, Fox Gulf. Fox Golf stroke Fox 6 Hotel Mike Quebec Tildes and Fox Golf stroke Fox 6 Golf Whiskey Victor Mike are there for another week or so with a pair of IC 7300 radios to vertical wires. They're operating holiday style and they are there on 60 through 10 meter sideband, FT4 and FT8. From Serbia, which is Yankee Uniform, we have this. This year is the 170th anniversary of Nikola Tesla's birth. Stations in the Amateur Radio Union of Serbia are authorized to use call signs Yankee Tango 170 Tesla through the end of the year. From Cambodia, which is X-Ray United, we find this. Tom, Delta Leva 7 Bosker Ocean, will once again be QRV as XU7 Oscar from February 7th to the 24th, reports DX News. And thank you, DX News, for that. And finally, from Sugar 9, which is Sao Tome and Principe, we have the following. Sugar 53 Boston Victor is QRV is Sugar 9 Boston Victor until February 20th, holiday style from, quote, a quiet location. Barut will be on with an IC 7000 to verticals and dipoles. He plans to be on 60, 40, 30, and 15 CW and sideband. On 30, 40, and 60 CW, his target frequencies will be 10.110, 7.005, and 5.351.5. Direct QSLs will be answered when he's back home. Clublog OQRS will be available with limited internet access while there and, quote, postal challenges. He will apparently give special instructions later, so stay tuned. And as soon as I hear it, you'll get it. Well, that's all we have for now. Until next week, this is Bill AJB saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Building a shack makes a number of assumptions about your situation, and to make it abundantly clear, it's not the only way to enjoy the hobby of amateur radio. Visiting clubs locally and remotely, being a member of a club, visiting other amateurs, setting up your station in a suitcase or a backpack, on a bicycle, in a car, on a bus or in a boat, some of the many other avenues open to you. That said, there is something magical about building your own shack. It has the ability to transform your hobby, and if you have the opportunity, I can highly recommend it, and I'd like to encourage you to consider the notion. As I've said previously, there is plenty of exploration and learning associated with putting one together. After you've spent some time reflecting, planning, designing, sourcing, building and testing the environment where you do amateur radio, you're likely to reach a point where you'll refer to that space as your shack. You might even come to think of it as your shack, rather than a collection of trade-offs that you've constructed in the best way you know how. Inevitably, you'll wonder what to do next. Several things come to mind. Creature comforts is probably the most obvious. A push-to-talk foot pedal or a desk microphone, either on a stand or hanging from a boom. An audio mixer, a couch, a soldering station, a microwave oven, a fan or air conditioning. In other words, plenty of opportunities for improvement and enhancement. Then there's computing, something that might interest you or not. It offers the ability to explore a whole different side of amateur radio, from logging through to digital modes, from weak signal propagation to tracking satellites. The possibilities are endless. Your shack is also potentially a communal place where you can meet with your friends to share the experience. It's a place for contemplation, for relaxation, for being an amateur. All of it is open to you as possibility, an excuse to improve and enhance. The thing is, that too will come to a point of, let's call it, completion, and you're left with more questions. Amateur radio is inherently experimental in nature. That's the whole point of the pursuit. Your license gave you access to the playground. Your shack is that playground. Now it's up to you to play. Of course, what playing looks like is unique to you. Over the past 15 years, I've been describing what playing looks like to me. And from the over 3 million downloads last year from my website alone, not to mention the newsletters, rebroadcasts, podcast inclusions, other streaming services, news reports, social media and messages I've received, they've encouraged you to explore and investigate this wondrous activity. The point is, the shack you just completed isn't finished, and hopefully it never will be. Whichever one it is, the first one, the one after that, or the next one, your shack is a place where you can experiment, learn, discover, test, fail, succeed, challenge, and enjoy the hobby of amateur radio. It's not the only place where you'll find this hobby, but it's your place. So have at it. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Hello, and welcome to the next chapter of Philip Nedlinger's KA4KOE's Dead Electrical Dudes, in which he takes an off-the-wall look at the movers and shakers that help grow our amateur radio hobby and other radio-related stuff. Philip has presented these dudes on EHAM over the last several years and has kindly allowed us to use them here on TWIAR. And so we continue with Dead Electrical Dudes number 5. This chapter's stiff Georg Simon Ohm entered mortal coil 16 March 1789, assumed room temperature 6 July 1854. One of the favorite movies of Philip's misspent youth was National Lampoon's Animal House. In this film, we see fraternity boys carousing, drinking, womanizing, gambling, and generally not taking anything seriously. Not surprising is the fact that most of the boys have abysmal grades and that their fraternity has been placed on super secret probation. Georgi would have fit right in. Ohm's father, Johann, was a self-educated working-class man, i.e. blue-collar, who had apparently busted his chops getting Georgi into Erlangen University. The old man was fed up with rumors of his son's excessive dancing, ice skating, and pool playing. After only 3 semesters, Georgi was pulled out of school and sent to Switzerland, where he more or less had to grow up. What followed after this enforced leave of absence from Erlangen was a series of unsatisfying teaching posts as young Ohm drifted through life. All he wanted was a full professorship at a prestigious institution. Ohm further educated himself and conducted independent research while holding a teacher's position at the Jesuit Gymnasium of Cologne starting in 1817. Publishing his research, Georgi realized would get him that coveted post, and research he did. In 1827, after a considerable amount of labor, head-scratching, and experimentation, he published his results in the paper De galvanische Kette mathematische Bearbeitet. This was quite a mouthful even in German. Read Mark Twain's essay, The Awful German Language, if you really want to laugh. Anyway, the end result of all that formal written Hun verboseness was E equals I times R, or volts equals amperes times ohms. This simple little formula defines all things electrical and electronic. If you don't know it, learn it, or at least do a little bit of research on your own. We can't do everything for you kids, okay? Unfortunately, this electrical thunderbolt out of the blue went largely unnoticed, and Ohm's theory was greeted with less than rampant enthusiasm from his professional peers. In 1841, the Royal Society awarded Georgi the Copley Medal, acknowledging his contributions in electrical research. In 1852, Ohm achieved his lifelong dream and became the chair of physics at the University of Munich. The Reaper had the last laugh, as poor Ohm only got to enjoy the fruits of his labor for 2 years before being mowed down by the aforementioned Reaper's scythe in 1854. Poor Georgi. Ohm's theory is now Ohm's law. Learn it, live it, love it. Don't ever forget it. Philip Neglinger, P.E., Ka4koe. The references: Mark Twain, The Awful German Language. A search will take you there. With thanks to Philip Nedlinger, Ka4koe, for permitting us to use his materials, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The 4th meeting of the World Radio Communication Conference Advisory Committee will be held on February 19, 2026, at the Federal Communications Commission in Washington, D.C. This 4th meeting of the WRC Advisory Committee will consider status reports and recommendations from its informal working groups concerning preparation for the 2027 World Radio Communication Conference, or WRC 27. At the 4th meeting, the WRC Advisory Committee will continue its work to finalize the recommendations for WRC 27 agenda items that do not yet have WRC Advisory Committee recommendation. This meeting is open to the public. The meeting will be broadcast live with open captioning over the internet from the FCC Live webpage at fcc.gov/live. There will be audience participation available during this meeting. The Commission's WRC 27 website contains the latest updated information and agendas on all scheduled meetings and advisory committee matters. Comments may be presented at the advisory committee meeting or in advance of the meeting by sending an email to wrc-27@fcc.gov.
The ARRL will announce the winner of the ARRL Sweepstakes ICOM Dream Station at Orlando Hamcation, coming to the Central Florida Fairgrounds February 13th through the 15th, 2026. Hosted by the Orlando Amateur Radio Club and serving as the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention, Hamcation features exhibits, technical and operating forums, a large flea market and tailgate area, and opportunities to meet ARRL officials and program representatives. Attendees can learn about initiatives including the ARRL Year of the Club and the America 250 Worked All States Award. A Saturday night banquet will include the presentation of Hamcation Awards and a keynote address from ARRL Senior Director of Marketing and Innovation, Bob Interbitson, NQ1R. Details and updates are available at hamcation.com.
It is time for this month's report from the Volunteer Monitor Program. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. Here is the current activity report from the VM program. 2 technician operators in Texas and 1 each in California, Arkansas, and Florida were issued advisories concerning 20-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. Operators in North Carolina and Tennessee were issued advisories regarding improperly wide signals on 3.927 MHz. Section 97.307, Subpart A of the Commission's rules states, no amateur station transmission shall occupy more bandwidth than necessary for the information rate and emission type being transmitted, in accordance with good amateur practice. Operators in Washington, Oregon, and California were issued advisories regarding single sideband operation on 7.299 MHz, too close to the band edge. An operator in Florida was issued an advisory for operation with an expired license. An operator in Maine was issued an advisory concerning his disregard of a directive from a local repeater owner to stop using the repeater. The FCC not only expects but requires a repeater owner to maintain control of their machines and will enforce such stay-off letters. The FCC requested assistance in a public safety case near McAllen, Texas, and an unlicensed operation case in California. Information was provided to the FCC in both, but no action was taken due to the FCC closure. The totals for monitoring for this month were 1,511 hours on HF frequencies and 1,575 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,090 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this month's report.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Thailand's newest satellite, NACSat-2, was recently deployed from the ISS. Although it has commercial payloads on board, they have also added an APRS digipeater for hams. The digipeater uses 145.825 MHz, FSK 9600 baud AX25 for both uplink and downlink. If interested in telemetry, you can tune to 400.630 MHz, which of course is outside the ham band, but you can still receive it. The telemetry is also FSK 9600 baud AX25. The amateur call sign is HS0K. There should be a lot more satellites developed and launched this year, some deployments from the ISS and some as add-on passengers on commercial launches. Should be interesting to see what some of the clubs, schools, and universities come up with. We will keep you informed with the weekly ARRL audio news. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at the solar weather forecast and the terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar activity was at high levels for most of the week, dominated by region 4366. The most notable event was an impulsive X 4.2 flare from that region on February 4th. Throughout the period, Region 4366 continued to exhibit a slight reduction in area and a modest simplification of its magnetic complexity. Region 4369 developed trailing spots, while regions 4370 and 4372 decayed in extent and complexity and became unipolar spot groups. The remaining numbered regions on the visible disk remained stable or in a slight state of decay. 3 eruptions were observed in coronagraph imagery during the period. First was a coronal mass ejection off the southeast limb, first observed in C2 imagery on February 4th, and was likely associated with flaring near regions 4370 and 71. This event was followed by post-eruptive arcades, also on February 4th, at the same location, which further confirmed the source region despite flare activity being partially obscured by region 4366. Modeling indicates no Earth-directed component. The second was a narrow eruption to the north-northwest, first seen in C2 imagery on February 4th. While potentially associated with the aforementioned X4.2 event, it dissipated quickly and its analysis is low confidence. Lastly, there was another narrow eruption noted off the northeast limb, first visible in Soho and Lascaux C2 imagery. This event was likely a sympathetic eruption triggered by the X4.2, starting at approximately between regions 4366 and 67. There was a slight potential of minor glancing blows from these eruptions early on February 8th. Moderate to high solar activity is expected due to M-class minor to moderate flaring for February 5th, with a high chance for X-class strong flares due to expected further activity from region 4366. The solar wind is expected to remain in the current slightly enhanced regime before returning to nominal conditions until midday on February 5th, when a disturbance is likely due to the expected arrival of the complex coronal mass ejecta associated with an X8.1 flare from region 4366. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Carl Wetzelschwab K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the Voice of America CAP online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, February 5th through the 6th, it's the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest. That's CW. February 7th and 8th, the LABRERS Digital Contest. That's digital. February 7th through the 8th as well, Vermont QSO Party. That's all modes there. February 7th and 8th, the 1010 International Winter Contest, single sideband and phone. February 7th through the 8th, the F9AA Cup. That's CW. And February 7th through the 8th, the European Union DX Contest. That is CW and phone. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on February 7th, the Hendricks County Hamfest hosting the ARRL Indiana section convention. That's in Danville, Indiana. February 13th through the 15th, the Orlando Hamcation hosting the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention in Orlando, Florida. And February 20th through the 21st, the Greater Houston Hamfest hosting the ARRL Texas State Convention in Roseburg, Texas. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find events in your area.
For amateur radio operators, adventure comes in all forms, whether it means landing on a remote island for a 2-week de-expedition or hiking to activate a Summit International Park. Others simply see adventure in the annual challenge to make that trip to Xenia, Ohio to attend Hamvention. Whatever your personal challenge is, it's in the spotlight this year, as Hamvention organizers have just announced that Radio Adventure is the theme for the 3 days from May 15th through May 17th at the Greene County Fairgrounds. Even if your biggest adventure ends up being your decision on what new rig to take home with you this year, expect the gates to be open as usual for a reunion among friends and your ham radio family.
Edge of Space Sciences, an AIRRL-affiliated club in Englewood, Colorado, has been monitoring 3 amateur radio Pico balloons as they continue to circumnavigate the globe. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with the story behind the Pico balloons.
Officially, the balloons are referred to as Flying Pico Tracker balloons. That breaks down to Pico for small. Tracker, custom-built computer, which has a GPS and radio transmitter to relay its location over long distances. And balloon, what you attach to a computer to see how far it can go. 2 balloons were released at HamCon, Colorado on October 25, 2026. EOSSP-3 has completed 5 circumnavigations, as in currently lost somewhere up north. No signal has been heard now for 4 days. ESOSSP-4 has completed several circumnavigations and is currently approaching India. Meanwhile, ESOOP-2 launched on September 18th, completed its 10th circular navigation at 12:05 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on February 4th. You can track the balloons on APRS.FI. Flight logs of both WSPR and APRS trackers, as well as various balloon configurations, are available. Club member Michael Pappas, W9CN, says the club has been active with Pico balloons since 1990, and it is an effort to help kids, as well as seasoned amateurs, understand the dynamics involved. The club has an FAA Part 101 waiver for Pico balloons up to 30 pounds, said Pappas. Air traffic will be diverted away from the balloon's path. Pico balloons are pretty inexpensive to construct. The balloon is similar to a Mylar party balloon and costs around $7. A small transmitter averages about $170. I'm John Ross, KD8I DJ.
More information can be found on the club's website, eoss.org.
An upcoming open-source hardware project called Open.Space aims to lower the barrier to Earth-Moon-Earth communications for amateur radio operators by using a modular software-defined phased array system instead of traditional large dish antennas. EME, or moon bounce, involves transmitting a signal toward the moon, reflecting it off the lunar surface, and receiving it back on Earth. Historically, this has required large, high-gain antennas, high-power transmitters, and precise mechanical tracking, putting it out of reach for many amateurs. Open.Space proposes using electronically steerable phased arrays built from small, low-cost, software-defined radio tiles. A phased array combines the signals from many small antennas using precise timing delays, allowing radio beams to be steered electronically without motors or moving parts. This enables rapid tracking, improved interference rejection, and compact, low-profile installations. A familiar consumer example of phased array technology is the flat panel antenna used by Starlink satellite internet terminals. At the core of the system is the Open.Space Quad Tile, a 4-antenna SDR module covering 4.9 to 6 GHz in the C-band. Each tile supports 40 MHz of bandwidth using an 8-bit ADC and delivers about 1 watt of transmit power per antenna. The tiles can operate as standalone 4x4 MIMO SDRs for RF experimentation, direction finding, or digital communications, or they can be combined into larger phased array structures. Multiple tiles can be assembled into phased arrays using a modular lattice frame. The mini starter array consists of 18 tiles, totaling 72 antennas. It is expected to provide roughly 34 dBi of gain, about 52.6 dBW of EIRP, and up to 60 degrees of electronic beam steering. While the mini configuration is not large enough for moon bounce, it is intended for learning, experimentation, satellite downlinks, and long-range directional links. For full EME capability, Open.Space proposes the Moon Array, built from 60 tiles and 240 antennas in a 1-meter wide aperture. This configuration is expected to deliver around 39.3 dBi of gain and 63.1 dBW of EIRP, making moon bounce experiments feasible. Additional planned applications include radio astronomy, RF imaging, and advanced phased array research. The Open.Space hardware has not yet been released, but the project website lists March 2026 as the expected shipping date. The developers note that the system is not intended for radar applications due to export control restrictions. Those interested can sign up on the Open.Space website to receive email updates when the hardware becomes available.
Sharing news of AMSAT activities, especially the work of the AMSAT Engineering Department, is an important function that supports AMSAT's information and education mission. It is also an important tool for retaining current members, recruiting new members, and for fundraising. Frank Karnauskas, N1UW, AMSAT VP Development, is asking, do we have 2 volunteers who can step up and spend just a few hours a week to help keep our information channel flowing? For the feature story editors, we have a pool of information that we've collected from Hamvention and symposium presentations that can quickly be converted into short stories for publication in the ANS weekly bulletins and into feature stories for the AMSAT journal. We typically start with a video or at least an audio recording of the presentation, which you would convert into a written transcript using an application that we provide. The editor then uses the transcript and author's original PowerPoint slides to create the final articles. We also have the need for someone to write press releases for other AMSAT activities, such as educational resources, the Youth Initiative, annual reports, and so on. For the video editor, again, we have a collection of videos from presentations that simply need opening titles to be added and a bit of tuning up inside the presentations themselves. There is no need for expensive software or especially super high-powered computers. Free software that is remarkably powerful but easy to learn is available. If a person is interested, we would also welcome someone to create promotional video shorts or other programs they are willing to create. We are not asking anyone for a lifelong commitment to these positions. Anyone who is willing to say, hey, I can do 5 or 10 stories would be a hero in my book. Persons interested in learning more about how they can make an important contribution can contact Frank at volunteer@amsat.org.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT's Satellite Shorts from All Over, and we begin this week with news from the SETI at Home project. For 21 years, from 1999 to 2020, millions of volunteers worldwide use their home computers to support SETI at Home, one of the largest citizen science efforts ever conducted. Operated by scientists at the University of California, Berkeley, the project analyzed radio data from the Arecibo Observatory and identified roughly 12 billion signals of interest. After a decade of follow-up analysis, researchers narrowed those detections to about 1 million candidates and then to 100 signals worthy of further investigation. Since July 2025, those targets have been reobserved using China's 500-meter aperture spherical telescope, or FAST radio telescope, which has 8 times the collecting area of Arecibo. While researchers do not expect those signals to be extraterrestrial in origin, the results helped establish new sensitivity limits for large-scale SETI searches. Scientists say the project's biggest legacy may be the lessons learned about filtering radio frequency interference and designing future all-sky techno-signature surveys. Next up, Blue Origin successfully completed the 38th flight of its New Shepard suborbital vehicle on January 22nd, marking the program's first mission of 2026. The mission, designated NS-38, launched from Blue Origin's Launch Site 1 in West Texas during a morning launch window. The flight carried 6 people on a brief suborbital journey above the Kármán line, the internationally recognized boundary of space. The crew included Tim Drexler, Dr. Linda Edwards, Elaine Fernandez, Alberto Gutierrez, Jim Hendren, and Dr. Laura Stiles. Stiles joined the mission shortly before launch after another crew member was unable to fly due to illness. With this flight, New Shepard has now flown 98 people to space. New Shepard is Blue Origin's operational human spaceflight system and serves as a testbed for reusable launch technologies and crewed operations. The program continues to support Blue Origin's long-term goals for expanding human access to space. And our final AMSAT story, AMSAT HB has announced the dates for the next edition of the HB9RG Trophy, which will take place from March 2nd through March 15th, 2026. The competition commemorates the first amateur radio satellite contact achieved on March 10, 1965, by Hans Rudolf Lauber, HB9RG, and Alphonse Herring, DL6EZA, a milestone in amateur satellite communications. Organizers report that the event will return following strong international participation and enthusiastic feedback from previous editions of the trophy. Based on participation input, AMSAT HB is currently revising the competition rules to improve fairness, accessibility, and the overall operating experience. These adjustments are intended to better reflect the needs and operating practices of the global satellite amateur radio community. Complete rules, participation procedures, and event updates are available on the AMSAT HB website.
Reports now being calculated suggest Earth's magnetic field was struck by a severe solar storm January 19th, triggering vibrant auroras in the U.S. and large parts of Europe. The storm broke a record that had stood for more than 2 decades. A severe and record-breaking geomagnetic storm rocked Earth's magnetic shield last night, shortly after the Sun unleashed a powerful X-class solar flare. The epic event, triggered by a stream of superfast solar particles, painted widespread auroras at unusually low latitudes across the northern hemisphere, particularly in Europe. The storm's severity, which exceeded that of the one in October of 2023, disrupted the HF bands, challenging ham radio operators while creating spectacular auroral displays.
The Artemis II mission crew began its quarantine period on January 23rd prior to its flight to the moon. This period, officially called the Health Stabilization Program, usually begins about 14 days before launch. During this time, astronauts minimize their contact with other people. This is necessary to rule out the possibility of illnesses that could delay their mission or develop during the flight. At this time, NASA has not yet set an official launch date for Artemis II, as testing of the rocket and spacecraft continues. Starting quarantine now allows for flexibility. Depending on the results of the launch dress rehearsal or other operational considerations, the crew may exit quarantine and return to it 14 days before any date. The crew began quarantine in Houston. If preparations for launch proceed successfully, they will fly to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida approximately 6 days before launch, where they will stay in special accommodations. During quarantine, the crew will be able to continue communicating regularly with friends, family, and colleagues who are complying with quarantine rules and will avoid public places, wear masks, and maintain distance from other people with whom they come into contact while continuing their latest training and medical examinations.
On January 29, 2026, the Federal Communications Commission adopted a decision on control of FCC-related businesses by foreign adversaries. Under these rules, nearly every entity that is subject to FCC regulation would be subject to new ownership reporting requirements, including entities that do not regularly report ownership today, such as cable and satellite companies, entities holding FCC equipment authorizations, and entities with private radio licenses, like those used for communication in factories or office buildings or by fleet managers. Penalties for failing to comply with the reporting requirements could include fines and revocation of all licenses or other authorizations. The new rules require the disclosure of foreign adversary interests by entities with direct ties to foreign adversaries, such as those with a principal place of business in a foreign adversary nation, and those that have 10% or greater direct or indirect voting or equity interests held by foreign adversaries, entities under the control of foreign adversaries, or citizens of foreign adversaries. Under the rules, any of these interests presumptively constitutes control by the foreign adversary, even if an entity formally is not under formal control of the adversary. Foreign adversaries are those designated by the Department of Commerce. The current foreign adversaries are Cuba, Iran, North Korea, the People's Republic of China, Russia, and Nicolas Maduro, the deposed president of Venezuela. Entities that have interests described in the rules will be given an opportunity to rebut the presumption that they are under foreign adversary control.
Amateur Radio Digital Communications, or ARDC, continues to accept grant applications from organizations aiming to advance the hobby of amateur radio and beyond. The next application deadline is just around the corner on February 1st, but 3 additional rounds of applications will be accepted later this year on April 1st, July 1st, and September 1st. ARDC makes grants to programs and organizations that aim to advance our mission and vision with strategic goals of getting more people learning, experimenting, and doing with amateur radio and digital communications technology. With the recent introduction of priority areas for funding, ARDC is especially interested in projects that align with the following areas: research and development, open hardware and software systems that enable learning and experimentation. For example, SDRs, open codec technologies, or new modulation techniques. Space-based communications, projects that create or expand access to satellite communications for amateur radio and digital communications, engaging communities in wireless communication. For example, GEO or HEO programs repurpose commercial satellites, space-based tools for learning. Open source education, scalable, open educational materials and hands-on projects that make amateur radio and digital communications more accessible, especially for new learners and clubs. ARDC welcomes proposals across the full range of amateur radio and digital communications, but projects that align with these areas remain a priority. You can learn more about applying for grants at the ARDC website.
The Alberta Digital Radio Society is pleased to announce that it has chosen orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, known as OFDM, as the modulation method for the enhanced data mode on its IP400 supernode. This mode will enable higher data rates than have been previously achieved with conventional FM radios, says Martin Alcock, VE6VH, founder of the IP400 project. Alcock goes on to say it will provide us with the ability to extend the network to a mobile station on a conventional repeater, which can be in either the 2-meter, 220, 440, and 900 bands, and with no radio modifications required. The goals of the IP400 project are not only to implement a higher speed mesh network on the 400 MHz band, but also to breathe new life into analog repeaters with a simple data upgrade, which will result in the addition of 3 modes: a 4F-SK compatible mode on 400 MHz and a high-speed OFDM mode at 2.39 GHz for linking and backbone purposes, and a slower audio band OFDM mode that is designed to work with existing VHF and UHF radios. The IP400 supernode is now entering its development phase. This node provides a data upgrade with 2 native modes, a compatible 4F-SK mode on 400 MHz, a high-speed OFDM mode on the 2.9 GHz band for backbone data network implementations, combined into a single RF modem. The hardware will be a HAT module for existing Raspberry Pi systems, which can operate either in a standalone mode or as a simple upgrade to an existing All-Star Link system. A third data mode is currently in the design phase, which will enable IP400 traffic on conventional FM radios. Copies of the specification are available on the developer GitHub site or to members upon request. The OFDM mode development is being sponsored by a grant from Amateur Radio Digital Communications.
The Artemis II crewed test flight, which was to have lifted off sometime early this month, has been delayed by NASA after the discovery of several issues, including hydrogen leaks in the Space Launch System tanks. Meanwhile, as the agency conducts a review and reschedules the launch for March, the space agency has announced its newly chosen group of volunteers to track the Artemis II, including 4 amateur radio operators. 34 volunteers from around the world have been chosen by the U.S. Space Agency to track the Orion spacecraft and its crew of 4 during the Artemis II test flight. NASA said this mission, which includes a trip around the moon, plays a vital role in settling the stage for a return to exploration of the lunar surface. The mission is also viewed as paving the way for the first crewed Mars mission. 4 amateur radio operators are among the 34 observers chosen by NASA in a group that includes universities, government agencies, and private companies. The Canadian Space Agency and the German Aerospace Center are among those chosen. Von Storch Engineering in the Netherlands and Intuitive Machines in Houston, Texas, are among the commercial entities selected. Academic institutions include the University of Zurich's Physics Department in Switzerland and the University of New Brunswick in Canada. The four hams are Chris Swear, K1 FSD of South Dakota, Dan Slater, AG6HF, and Loretta Smalls, AJ6HO, both of California, and Scott Tilley, VE7TIL of British Columbia, Canada. The hams will be using their radio equipment to track transmissions from the Orion over the course of its 10 days in space.
During the past week, ARRL CEO and Secretary David A. Minster, NA2AA, sent the following email to ARRL members. John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report from League headquarters.
In a message emailed to all ARRL members on January 28th, CEO David Minster, NA2AA, shared news of a recent change in leadership within the Atlantic Division. Atlantic Division Director Robert B. Flaminglio, K3RF, became ineligible to continue serving after voluntarily choosing not to submit an annual recertification statement as required under ARRL Bylaw 46. As a result, the director position was vacated in accordance with the bylaw. The board member statement on authority, responsibility, and expectations, which you can see at www.arrl.org/general information, confirms that board members have read and understand their fiduciary obligations under ARRL's governing documents and applicable law. Signed statements were completed by all 36 other board members, as well as all candidates who stood for election during 2025. We sincerely thank Director Flaminglio for his many years of volunteer service and for his contributions to ARRL and the amateur radio community, included Minster. Consistent with ARRL cessation procedures, Vice Director Marty Newingham, AG3I, has assumed the role of Atlantic Division Director effective immediately. A replacement Vice Director will be named at a later date. Newingham lives in Greenburgh, Pennsylvania, and was previously appointed Vice Director in 2025 in July. He is an ARRL Life member and a gold-level contributor to the ARRL Diamond Club. He'll serve the remainder of the term that expires December 31st, 2026. You can read the full member bulletin at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD&IDJ.
ARRL remains committed to adherence to its governing documents and to keeping members informed regarding board governance, leadership transitions, and organizational continuity. We appreciate our members' engagement and ongoing support.
Registration has opened for the annual HAMSci workshop, which this year will be held in Connecticut and hosted by the ARRL on the campus of Central Connecticut State University. The dates are March 14th and 15th. The workshop theme is Discovering Science Through Ham Radio and will showcase how HAMSci's cooperative relationships between researchers, ham radio operators, citizen scientists, and students have brought about notable advances in weather studies, propagation sensing, and ionospheric research. Visitors will have an opportunity to visit the Newington, Connecticut headquarters of the ARRL, where licensed hams will be able to get on the air from the Hiram P. Maxim Memorial Station, W1AW. Although the two-day event is designed for in-person attendance at the New Britain, Connecticut University campus, plans are in the works to provide opportunities for virtual attendance. Details will be announced close to the date of the workshop.
From February 7th to the 22nd, 2026, a 16-day event will be held to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the city of Gdynia, Poland, 1926 to 2026. The Board of Pomeranian Field Division of the Polish Amateur Radio Union, PZK, in Gdansk, is inviting all amateur radio operators to participate. Radio contacts with 6 special event stations accumulating the required number of points will qualify for an operator to receive a commemorative electronic award. A limited number of commemorative paper QSL cards will also be sent, but only to operators served by QSL bureaus. Amateur radio operators are advised to update their profile on QRZ.com to be eligible for the awards. It's estimated now there are some 16,000 amateur radio operators in Poland. Complete information, including frequencies and modes and call signs of the special event stations, can be found at arrl.org.
Kenya is set to make history in 2026 after being selected to host the Amateur Radio on the International Space Station program, a global initiative that enables the public to communicate live with astronauts aboard the International Space Station. The Kenya Space Agency announced the selection, positioning the country at the heart of an international effort to advance space education and public engagement in science. Kenya is the only African nation chosen for the 2026 ERA cycle, a milestone expected to spark interest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and inspire innovation across the country. According to the agency, the hosting window will run between July and December 2026. During this period, Kenyan students, professionals, and members of the public will take part in live radio sessions with astronauts on the ISS. Participants will have the opportunity to ask questions and receive real-time answers about daily life in orbit, scientific research conducted on board, and the realities of living and working in space. The Kenya Space Agency will oversee preparations for the event in collaboration with Pan-African Citizen Science e-Laboratory mentor and agency liaison Harold Safari. Planning efforts will include technical coordination, public outreach, and the selection of participants with an open call to be issued for interested individuals and institutions wishing to take part in the live ISS contacts. Across Africa, space activity is gaining momentum, driven by advances in satellite technology, increased regional cooperation, and the establishment of the African Space Agency in 2025. Kenya's participation in ERAS reflects this growing ambition with a strong focus on public education and citizen involvement.
With the QSO they made via the Oscar III satellite in March of 1965, a ham in Switzerland and a ham in Germany changed the shape of satellite QSOs to come. It was a first for amateur radio, and one that AMSAT HB in Switzerland is again honoring with the HB9RG trophy. There was not yet a global satellite community when Hans Rudolf Lauber, HB9RG, and Alphonse Herring, DL6EZA, made their pioneering satellite QSO in 1965. That moment gave rise to a new era for ham radio, and in the years that followed, as more satellites populated the skies, the international community developed a zest for working the birds. AMSAT HB's trophy, which bears Hans Rudolf Lauber's call sign, is an honor confirmed for achieving DX via ham radio satellite between March 2nd and 15th. The competition is timed to coincide with the original two-day contact made on March 10th, 1965. Only QSOs via low, medium, and highly elliptical Earth orbit satellites will be permitted. On the final day, hams will be permitted to use a geostationary satellite for a single contact with HB9RG, the bonus station.
The pilot of a private plane that crashed north of Australia's Gold Coast has been identified as an amateur radio operator and successful businessman. He was well known for the ham radio equipment business he built decades earlier from a garage-based operation. The single-engine plane had just taken off from a private airstrip on Tuesday, January 27, when it came down, killing the pilot and his passenger at the scene. The pilot was identified as Greg Ackman, VK4BBX, owner of Mobile One Australia. Various news reports described him as an experienced aviator. His passenger was said to be from Sydney. According to media reports, the two were on their way to New South Wales. Greg designed much of the amateur equipment sold by the company that he founded. A ham since 2021, he was a visible presence at amateur radio events throughout Australia. As we come to the air, investigators are still trying to determine the cause of that crash. Greg was 73.
ARRL will host the 9th Annual Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, or HamSci Workshop, on March 14th and 15th, 2026, with primary activities held at Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and additional events at ARRL headquarters in Newington. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details.
The International Workshop brings together radio amateurs, scientists, educators, and students to explore how amateur radio serves as a practical tool for scientific research and citizen science. Organized by the HamSci community, the 2026 workshop carries the theme Discovering Science Through Ham Radio. Presentations and discussions will highlight real-world research enabled by amateur radio, including ionospheric and space weather studies, meteor scatter propagation, radio-based sensing technologies, and the growing use of personal space weather stations. stations. The weekend will feature oral and poster presentations, invited tutorials, and sessions designed to be accessible to both newcomers and experienced researchers. A Saturday evening banquet will include a keynote address by astrophysicist Mark Kuchner, NASA's Citizen Science Officer. Attendees will also have the opportunity to tour ARRL headquarters, including the ARRL Laboratory, W1HQ Radio Laboratory, and W1AW, the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station, with opportunities to get on the air. Amateur radio operators, educators, students, engineers, and citizen scientists are all encouraged to participate. A call for abstracts for presentations and posters is now open through February 1st, 2026, and registration is now available. I'm John Ross, KDNIDJ.
The program emphasizes how these efforts not only advance scientific understanding, but also directly inform and improve amateur radio operating and technology. While the workshop is planned primarily as an in-person event, a virtual attendance option is expected to be announced closer to the date. Additional details, including registration and abstract submission information, are available at hamsci.org/hamsci2026.
Thailand's NAKSAT-2 satellite is preparing for deployment from the International Space Station, with release currently scheduled for February 3, 2026. The mission continues Thailand's university-led CubeSat development program following the earlier NAKSAT-1 mission. The project is led by King Man Kut's University of Technology, North Bangkok, and Thailand, working with domestic and international partners to advance satellite engineering, payload integration, and on-orbit operations. NAKSAT-2 was transported to the International Space Station in late 2025 and is a 3U CubeSat designed to host multiple payloads. The satellite expands on NAKSAT-1, which demonstrated Thailand's ability to design and build a satellite domestically. Development and testing were conducted in cooperation with NB Space and other academic and research partners. The mission is intended to help Thailand develop multiple payload CubeSat platforms and prepare for future rideshare launch opportunities. The satellite carries both educational and research payloads. Non-amateur missions include the Earth imaging camera, a store and forward IoT data collection system for remote sensors, ultraviolet radiation measurement instrumentation, and in-orbit evaluation of space-qualified components. These payloads are part of a broader national workforce development program coordinated through the Thai Space Consortium and academic partner networks. The satellite will be operated in orbit using ground stations located in Thailand. NAKSAT-2 also supports amateur radio operations through an APRS digipeater payload developed in cooperation with the Amateur Radio Society of Thailand. The amateur payload operates using coordinated frequencies through the International Amateur Radio Union Satellite Frequency Coordination Process. The APRS digipeater system uses 145.825 MHz for uplink and downlink, using FSK modulation at 9600 BPS, with AX.25 framing. The amateur satellite call sign assigned to the mission is HS0K. In addition to amateur payloads, the spacecraft transmits engineering telemetry on 400.630 MHz using FSK at 9600 BPS with AX.25 framing and a 1-minute beacon interval. Following deployment, project coordinators have requested assistance from the monitoring community to receive, decode, and submit telemetry reports from the 400.630 MHz downlink, which is outside the amateur radio allocation. NAKSAT-2 continues the growing trend of university-driven satellite programs contributing technical capability, education, and operational experience to the global amateur satellite community. University-built satellites are playing an increasing role in expanding access to space while supporting educational outreach and new opportunities for amateur radio experimentation.
For the next 2 months, the Young Ladies Radio League will be reviewing scholarship applications from qualified YLs who are pursuing advanced degrees, preferably in subjects relevant to communications or radio. The application period opened on February 1st and closes on April 1st. YLs holding valid amateur radio licenses anywhere in the world are eligible for any of 3 scholarships. Preference is being given to YLs who are members of the YLRL. The Ethel Smith, Kilo 4, Lima Mike Bravo, Memorial Scholarship, and the Mary Lou Brown, November Mike, 7 November Memorial Scholarship both provide $2,500 each toward a student's full-time pursuit of a bachelor's or graduate degree at any accredited university. Students who are enrolled in part-time studies can apply for the Martha Wessel, Kilo Zero, Echo Papa Echo Memorial Scholarship. Those students must be involved in full-time work or have roles as family caregivers or stay-at-home parents. For details or an application form, visit the YLRL website at ylrl.net and search for scholarships.
And finally this week, several amateur radio clubs across the country will operate special event stations for President's Day and George Washington's birthday. The Mount Vernon Amateur Radio Club in Virginia will host a special event to commemorate the 2026 President's Day and George Washington's birthday. Special event station K4US will be in operation on February 14th and 15th from 1000 to 0300 UTC each day from George Washington's Mount Vernon estate on the west shore of the Potomac River. Frequencies used will be 7.042, 7.242, 14.042, and 14.242 megahertz. A QSL card will be available. The K9WRA Woodford County, Illinois Repeater Association will operate special event station N9L on February 14th and 15th from 1600 to 2200 UTC to honor President Washington's 294th birthday and Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Contact can be made on 7.205 megahertz and a QSL card will be available. The Columbia Basin DX Club in George, Washington will operate special event station W7G on February 22nd, 2026 to commemorate President Washington's birthday. George, Washington is the only location in the United States with the first and last name of a U.S. president. Visit the club's website for more information. Also, you can visit the ARRL Special Event Station database to find other on-air events and commemorations.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is streamed on the internet, broadcast on low-power FM, and heard on nets and repeaters all around the world, like the K2IWR repeater operated by the Skyline Amateur Radio Club on 147.180 MHz in Cortland, New York, where This Week in Amateur Radio is heard each Tuesday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to have your club's repeater announced on This Week in Amateur Radio, send us an email with all the pertinent information to w2xbs77@gmail.com. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the Rich on Tech podcast, courtesy of Premier Networks, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.